walking through this slop just to visit an island. This seems to be the north point of entry. Good afternoon and welcome to Kings Island above the Connecticut River. Kings Island is not too far south of the Massachusetts border between Enfield and Suffield, and it's 120 acres and just shy of a mile long. The plan for today is to hike south from my northernmost entry point and see what I can find. Much like Adam Island earlier in the year, there's some random colors on the trees. The Appalachian Mountain Club built a river camping site here in early 2019. Behind me you've got a couple of platforms and a bear box. Looks like the last entry is from just a couple of days ago. And goes all the way to September 2018. The campsite is good for up to 12 people on these two platforms here. And then way in the background there you can see the outhouse. Back off into the woods we go. Been following this slightly upper bank for a good stretch here. River, lowlands, and then up to where there's kind of a rough path. Somebody clears a nice campsite here. We're about halfway down the island. Sorry if I'm blowing up your spot. As we continue to head south, I can tell you the earliest history of the island is as a Native American fishing camp. They would cast nets into the river and catch shad. It first starts showing up in documents in 1641 when a Native American woman named Quashebuk was trying to sell the land to a John Lewis, and it turned out that her father had already sold it to a man named Reverend Ephraim Hewitt. And so after a little court battle, Ephraim Hewitt ended up with the property and became the first official owner of the island. What the heck is this? Some kind of natural shelter that somebody built at some point. After Reverend Hewitt's death, a Massachusetts court, surprisingly, deeded land to a John Pynchon for his work surveying the Massachusetts and Connecticut border. Then over the next 200 years or so, it was in the hands of families with last names like Devotion and Lyman and King. That one should be familiar. Until 1864, when the island was purchased by a Dewitt Clinton Terry, of which some of his foundations still remain. Now, Terry was known as a good farmer, and he operated a ferry over to the Suffield side. But really, he was known as a Millerite or an Adventist. Now, Millerites or Adventists were a group who were continually predicting the end of the world. Most notably in 1873, it actually even made it into the New York Times. And obviously they never quite got the dates right, but that means that large groups of the religious sect would gather on the island in anticipation of the end of days. Now this foundation here is probably the barn, and the one we were just at could have been the homestead. Of course, possibly vice versa. How about this? A few hundred feet further south, We reach the southern tip of the island with its own fancy camp setup. And this view. This is the western side of the island, much shallower section of the Connecticut River between here and Suffield. And now it's time to head back up island, see what we can find on the western side. Now, like I said previously, in doing my research, I found that Terry operated a ferry, and I'm guessing it was here on the southwest side. And the cool detail was that there was still a chain around one of the trees for the tow rope that connected to the shore. Now, I think my chances of finding it are pretty slim, but would be a cool detail if you could find it. Terry owned the property until 1889 when he sold it, although I couldn't find a name for the person that he sold it to. Whoever did buy it took the house and moved it from the island to somewhere on Suffield Street in Windsor Locks. And I couldn't find, or I didn't dig deep enough to find out which house it is. Looks like we might be crossing what's a dry seasonal stream bed. I've managed to almost do a whole circuit of the island and have barely mentioned why the island is named King Island. And as I said before, it was previously owned by the kings, but the majority of their land was here at the northwest end. They operated a ferry between Suffield across the river to Enfield, and the name Kings Island entered the record books on the 1869 county map. The island's most recent owner is Connecticut Light and Power, now known as Eversource. I found an account from the late 1950s that it was owned by them, so they had it for a while. But an article from July of this year, 2020, about the small forest fire that happened here. A town official is quoted as saying that Eversource no longer owns Kings Island, and in fact it's public property. Just like I found it. Now, Eversource did allow the public to use the island for recreation, and now that it's public property, kind of wonder whether it's town or state. Either way, it's great news. If you're coming out to visit the island, seems like all the highlights are on the eastern shore over here, so you can limit your exploration to that. Enjoy that view one more time. Now I'm going to walk my kayak back to the boat launch. How often do you get to say that? And I'll see you next time.